All right, this is the table saw. Some people call it a variety saw because it can be used to cut a variety of different cuts. The most common operation on the saw is ripping, where you're cutting with the grain of the wood. We can also use it for cross cutting, which we have an accessory called a miter gauge. We can use it for cutting tenons. We have an accessory for that. It's not here right now. I'll show you that later. We can use it for cutting combs, large concave cuts on the inside of a board. We can use it for cutting lots of different joints, rabbets and dados and that type of thing. So there's several different uses of this tool. It's probably the most common, well-used tool in an average small wood shop, a table saw. This particular one's about 12 inches. It's a 12-inch saw. The other one we have back there, other ones we have back there are 10-inch saws. That's just the largest blade that fits on the tool. All right. Let's go on to, let's stop it once. And
Hey, need help?
okay, so you ready to roll?
Yep, it's rolling.
All right, the parts of the table saw are pretty varied, but let me go through the main ones here. First, the most important part is the blade area. And the blade area is covered with an access throat plate, it's called. We have a fence. Zoom in on that fence. We have a fence, and this particular fence is a type of fence where you only have one lever, and it's got a scale, has a scale that's active within 30 seconds of an inch, so you simply line up the distance you want, and that automatically ensures the width of the cut, the distance between the blade and the fence. So this is called the fence. We have several mechanisms. Pause it a minute. We have several mechanisms down here that we use for adjusting the blade. Can you see this okay? We have the blade height hand wheel, which raises and lowers the blade. In the middle of the blade height hand wheel, it has a lock. So we make sure the lock is loose before we raise and lower the blade. On the side, right side over here, we have another hand wheel with a lock. If we loosen that lock, we can tilt the blade. You can see it better. Okay, I'm not going to tilt it all the way. It tilts down to 45 degrees. Or I bring it all the way back up. And we'll stop. I'm going to re-lock the tilt hand wheel so it doesn't move while I'm using it. Okay, we have a guard splitter assembly. Not cumbersome, but it works. Basically, you just grab a hold of it here and back here, and you can pull it out away. If it's in the way, you can pull it back. It has a lock right here that allows it to float down. So let me put it in place once, and we'll see how it works. You get it centered over the blade, unlock it, and then as you use your saw, cut your board, it will guard you. We're going to pull it out of the way for now. And the reason we're going to pull it out of the way for now is so I can show you the other parts of the safety devices. On the far end, we have a guard splitter assembly. To remove it, you have a wing nut back here. Just take the wing nut off. There's the wing nut. It's got a little wrench attached to the table. Loosen that bolt up there, lift it up, and the splitter guard is removable. Now, I'm not showing you how to take the splitter guard off so you can throw it over to the side and never use it, but there are several operations when you don't cut all the way through a board, when you'll want to have the splitter and guard off. Put it back on, just reverse the process. Go ahead and snug up the bolt. Just snug it, don't need to tighten it up. Finger tighten the wing nut back here. And what this device does is it keeps a board from pitching the blade. That's what the plate does, the splitter is called. Sometimes when wood is dried, it has some internal stresses built in. And that internal stress will cause that board to come together. Well, if the splitter wasn't there and the internal stresses caused that board to go together, the board would pinch the blade while it was turning and it could shove it back in your direction. All right. Then there's an anti-kickback leads here. These act like a one-way valve. They let a board go, let me get a board. They let a board go one direction, which is the good direction. I'll do it on this side. They let it go this direction, but because of the teeth, they prevent it from going backwards. Okay, so we've got like a one-way valve. It lets the board go one way, but not the other. Those are called the anti-kickback fingers. Okay, we have another accessory right here called a miter gauge. Miter gauge is used as a slot for cross cutting. It's used for cross cutting. We'll show you more about how to use that later. The switch to start and stop it, right here. We also have a disconnect switch. All the tools in this room, as we previously talked about, have a disconnect switch. The one for this tool is over here. We'll show you that in a later sequence and kind of point it out to you. We have several accessories we use when we're cutting narrow wood. We have a feather board. We have several types of push sticks, push blocks. Actually, that's called a push stick also. So we have several accessories for ripping narrow stock or working with narrow stock. Okay, go.
Pause it.
Yeah. The next sequence is about just general safe use skills on this particular tool. Some of them are the same for other power tools in the area, but these are definitely for this particular tool. I've already mentioned that we use the guard splitter whenever possible. Sometimes it's possible to use the anti-kickback device splitter only. Sometimes it's possible to use the guard only. Sometimes it's possible to use them both together. Hopefully most of the time you use them both together. We want to set the blade height. I'm going to pull this up out of the way so you can see it. We want to set the blade height so it's about 1/8 of an inch above the stock. Zoom in on that one.
Why don't we push that guard out of the back?
Push the guard out of the way. Okay. So if you look, about 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 quarter at the most above the stock. Obviously what that does is if the particular you goofed up and you got your hands for some reason in the way, the deepness it can cut is that much. If you got your blade sticking out like that, you're going to lose fingers or hand or both. Okay, so we're going to have that always adjusted so it's a minimal distance above the stock. You only want to use sharp tools on a saw blade. Now obviously it's my responsibility to keep these tools sharp in here. But when you get your own tools, your own saws, you need to make sure you only use sharp tools. A dull tool will cause severe kickback a lot quicker than a sharp one will. Sometimes we need a helper. If you look on this side of the saw, we have this roller acceptor that we built several years ago, and that works great for this particular application. But sometimes you have a saw that doesn't have one. So I'm going to remove this. I'm just going to set it over here out of the way. You can hang on to it. We won't be there long. And I'll show you what you do if you've got a situation where you don't have a roller takeout. I need a volunteer here.
Oh, Chad,
okay.
Way to get in there.
So I'm going to be pretending that I'm sawing this board, and I'm going to, since it's less than 4 inches, which I'll talk about later, I'm going to use a push stick. I'm going to push it all the way past. Now that helper, Chad, the helper over there, is only going to support the stock until I take my hands off. Let's do it one more time. All he's going to do is put his hands underneath and support the stock until after I remove my hands. He's going to just hold on to it, keep from hitting the floor. Now my hands are out of the way so he can take it the rest of the way out. Okay? Thanks, Ed. You can put that back on the end there just as you fall down the floor. Okay? Next thing you want to do is avoid all distractions. If, since we have a lot of people working around here, there's times when people get a little, oh, I don't know, talking or whatever, and you want to focus on what you're doing, especially people that don't have a lot of experience. Even people who do have experience should focus on what they're doing. Okay, it's a workplace environment. Folks, when you get out in the real world working, you're going to be looked at negatively if you start goofing around while people are working and doing potentially dangerous activities. So you might as well get in the habit of doing it right here and now, of having a serious approach to these tools when you're using them. Avoid distractions. Tool and accessory placement. Anything that's not being used to do the operation, so if I'm ripping a board, for instance, I'm ripping a board, I want to have my hands or any accessories that I might want to use over here. Everything else, any other boards, any other tools, especially if you happen to have a tri-square, something like that, should be placed where it cannot run into the saw blade. So I've got just what I need here. Make sure you do all your adjustments on a tool when the blade has stopped. You don't want to make adjustments or adjust the fence when the blade's running. It's kind of dangerous. Okay? And lastly, we pointed this out a little earlier, but you couldn't see it on the film. But if you look right down here, this is a disconnect switch. Push that down, and that turns off all power to the machine. So now I can safely go in here and remove the blade if I need to. Okay, turn it back on. If you don't happen to have a tool that has a disconnect switch, it's probably got a plug. And then you just unplug the optics. Okay. Okay, that's it. Oh, wait a minute, I got one more. One more. Always turn the machine off when you leave it. When you walk away from it, make sure it's stopped so the next person that comes up doesn't accidentally get hurt. Okay.
You want him to add it, or?
Doesn't matter. Okay, do I have? No. All right. One of the students just came up with another safety rule, and that is you always make sure that the tool is running at full speed before you start your cut. If your board happened to be touching the stock as such, and I turned it on, it's probably going to kick it back. It's probably what's going to happen. It's not good on your body, it's not good on the tool, so make sure it's running at full speed. Okay. All right, the next thing I want to talk to you about is ripping, because that's the thing that you're going to do the most on this saw, especially at the beginning. Once you get your project started, you're going to want to get a lot of the basic stock cut down to length and width and all that type of stuff. We've gone through the squaring process and previously, and you know that you have to have wood that is flat and has a straight edge. So there's no way, say again?
The guide thing there.
Guards in the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Better?
Yeah.
Again, I've kept the guard out of the way so that you can see what's going on. You would want to use the guard when you're doing this operation. Okay, again, make sure the one face is flat, it's against the table. That's flat. Make sure you got a straight edge. That straight edge is against the fence. Don't ever cut warp stock on the table saw. As it starts to twist, it binds the blade, and you increase the chance of it kicking back dramatically. All right. So let's say I'm going to cut a board that's about 5 inches wide. So I'm going to set my saw to 5 inches. Push the lever all the way down. Stop a minute. All right. So the first thing you do is you set your fence to the right desired size. And if you look closely, there's they call it a cursor. It's a little scratch in the inside of this plastic, and I'm going to go ahead and set that cursor on the 5 because I want a 5-inch wide board, lock it all the way down, and I'm ready to make my cut. Okay. All right. Now, there's nothing wrong with using these accessories, But our rule is if the board is 4 inches or wider that you're going to be cutting, you may use your hands only. So I don't need to use these at this time because the board's 5 inches. It's greater than 4. I'm going to do 3 different things when I feed the board. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I hold the board down, that direction. Second thing I do, I'm going to make sure I hold it against the fence, that direction. And of course the third thing is I'm going to push it through. After I push it through, I got to make sure that the tail end of the board passes the blade, and then I'm going to pick my hand back up. So here we go. Turn the machine on. Hold it like so. My left hand goes back. Right hand pushes all the way through. It's past the blade. What you don't want to do is reach over and grab that piece of wood. Instead, walk around and grab that piece of wood right over here. Or get a helper to do it. Same thing. Very good. All right. If I want to cut a narrow piece of wood, I'm going to do the same operation I did before, but I'm going to set it at 2 inches. I'm going to cut this narrow piece of wood. Again, the guard is removed simply for sake of clarity. Turn it on. Got my featherboard, got my push stick. I'm going to hold it down and to the right by holding the featherboard like so. I don't need this right away because I'm a long way from it. My left hand stays behind the blade. Once I get to the end, move your left hand. And we'll finish. Again, don't reach over the blade. Let a helper grab it and pull it out of the way. Okay. Another thing that I didn't show you, thank you. Another thing that I didn't tell you about, but I demonstrated it, was when I cut these boards, either one of these boards, doesn't matter which one I did, I made sure that I was standing beside the kickback zone. This is the kickback zone. I stood over here and did my work. Just in case it would kick back, I wouldn't get struck by the board. It's not going to happen very commonly if you do practice all the safety devices, or use all the safety devices. Okay. Stop it. I can't think of anything else. This is a big safety no-no. Whenever you're cutting a board, that distance this way is greater. In other words, the distance between the fence and the blade is greater than its feed direction. This is the feed direction because we're feeding it this direction. Okay, this is a perfect example. Don't use the table saw for ripping. Don't use the table saw for ripping. I'm going to not turn the machine on, but I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. Make sure you get close to this one. Okay? Just to make sure we understand what's happening here. If I were to attempt this, everything would work fine until I got to the last part of the cut. When I start getting to the last part of the cut, what's going to happen is the blade that's rotating this direction is going to grab the edge of this board and it's going to start pushing it this way. Since I don't have much bearing surface over there on the fence, it's very possible that that board could grab a hold, and before you can say anything, it's going to go flipping back here and either hit you or hit the person behind you or the wall or something like that. So you never rip a board whose distance between the blade and the fence is greater than its feed distance. I don't care if the grain's running this way or the grain's running this way. If it's a piece of plywood, doesn't matter. Just make sure that this distance is less than this distance. That make sense? Yeah. Okay. Very important. All right, the last operation I want to show you today is cross-cutting. Cross-cutting is done, as I said earlier, with a miter gauge. When you're using a miter gauge, don't use the fence. So what I'm going to do is move the fence completely out of the way. I'm going to have a mark on my stock. So if I want a board that's 13 inches long, I'd lay 13 inches out from here to here and cut on the waist side of that line. Okay? Let me demonstrate. Notice the fence is out of the way. That prevents that same thing from happening that I previously talked to you about, where a board is shorter this direction than it is this direction. So here we go. Turn it on. Hold it tight. And I've got the board cut the length. You can use the table saw perfectly safely. However, if you look over there, you'll notice we have two miter box saws, a compound, a regular miter box saw. We have another compound saw right here. And then way behind me, not in use right now, but there's a radial arm saw. All those are better tools for cross-cutting. So do your cross-cutting elsewhere, if possible. If you're in your own shop sometime or a place where there is no miter box saw, this is a safe way to do so. That's it. Got one more second. There's a few rules that you never want to do. One rule is you never want a freehand saw. Picking a board like this and thinking I'll just cut it like so is extremely dangerous. You might get away with it on a little toy table saw in your hobby shop, but this is a several horsepower motor with a 12-inch blade. You won't outmuscle it. It's going to take you for a ride. If your hands are in the way, you're going to lose fingers. So never freehand saw. I already mentioned it, but I'll say it again. You've cut a piece of wood, it's all the way through, you stop there and walk around. Don't reach over it and try to grab it like this. It's not safe. Make sure you don't have any long, loose sleeves. Make sure you don't have any shirt tails that are going to get in the way. Make sure all your jewelry is either tight on you or in your pocket. And never clean scrap wood out with your finger. That saw blade's, if you just got done cutting that piece of wood and the saw blade's still turning, do not reach in here and pull it out like that. If it's in your way, you can take a push stick if you want to and pull it out of the way. Or better yet, turn the machine off. That's it.